I'm Chuck Black, and this is the Age of Ingenuity, our weekly chronicle of Canada's current innovation economy. We've got some good stories this week, if only because innovative and ingenious actions are more likely to take place during periods of disruption.
Hello, I'm Brian Orlotti, and here are a few of those stories. And our first piece comes from entrepreneur.com titled 8 Ways for Your Business to Stay Ahead During the Coronavirus Outbreak by Oliver Isaacs. Setting direct health concerns aside, it has now become clear that coronavirus will not pass without leaving some long-term business and economic consequences in its wake. While it might be tempting to focus on just staying afloat in the moment, putting out the fires as and when they threaten to appear, it's crucial to plan for the future of your business and be fully prepared for what will come next. Here's a helpful 8-step guide to getting started. Number 1, find leads and customers ahead of time. 2, adapt your services to the current situation. 3, market your solutions with coronavirus in mind. 4, ensure your services will still be relevant at later phases. 5, identify the challenges to your business. 6, plan solutions with several scenarios in mind. 7, use alternative solutions to maintain daily operation. And 8, implement tech upgrades to keep communication flowing.
What we've got here is an article for business owners who think that even though most non-essential businesses have closed down, they personally are not non-essential. And these organizations, these entrepreneurs, are looking for ways to remain in the public eye. Is that a fair sort of assessment of the situation?
Yes, and particularly in the U.S., where a lot of small and medium business owners have no guarantees as to what might be coming in the future. Yes, it's understandable that they would be wanting to stay in operation in any way possible.
Now that's fair. So many businesses, as a result of this crisis, are a week, 2 weeks away from being closed permanently, and there's a lot of worry that the economy won't get up and running anytime soon.
And next up is a piece from Toronto's own Mars Discovery District, How Canadian Startups Are Tackling the COVID-19 Crisis by Barry Chong. While the outbreak continues to spread around the world, experts in Canada are working to contain the virus. With the World Health Organization officially declaring COVID-19 an international pandemic, nations have doubled down on flattening the curve of the crisis by imposing unprecedented controls on citizens to slow the spread of the virus and, therefore, save lives and relieve exhausted healthcare systems. America has banned travel from most of continental Europe. Regions in China are still in lockdown, and African countries have moved to restrict European visitors. Such a global problem requires a global solution. This call to action has galvanized Canada's tech community, many of them shifting their everyday business pursuits in hopes of bringing the crisis to a decisive end. Here's how Canadian startups are tackling the COVID-19 outbreak. And among the many startups listed in the article, 2 of particular note lie in the section of Spreading Information Faster Than Any Disease. Excellent title. These 2 startups include Blue Dot, a Toronto-based startup that utilizes AI to track the spread of the coronavirus, to analyze infection patterns, which in turn would greatly assist public health authorities in planning and ordering equipment. And also DNA Stack, which is another startup here in Toronto, which uses AI to analyze DNA for genetic markers of certain diseases, which of course would be invaluable in the development of vaccines and drugs to combat the coronavirus.
So what I see here is a logical progression from the first article we talked about. The first article discussed primarily how to remain relevant and in the public eye during the crisis. This one talks about innovative companies and organizations who are not only remaining front and center in the public eye, but they're also doing something useful. They're combating the current crisis. They're coming up with solutions to the coronavirus epidemic, and they're performing useful functions. And I like this. In order to build an innovative ecosystem, you have to do the business functions as outlined in the first article. You have to be working towards something useful and something that people want, as outlined in the second article. To me, it sounds like a fairly optimistic story.
Agreed. And again, it shows the incredible talent that Canadians have at their fingertips, and that Canadians can punch above their weight when they choose to. And to assist during the COVID-19 crisis, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has announced a series of support programs for Canadian small businesses, and those programs are being tracked through a number of organizations. The first of these being Canada's Aerospace Industries Association of Canada, or AIAC. They have a dedicated website here for updates and resources for various government assistance programs for their industry.
Various exemptions to the shutdown of services. Looks like they've also got various government announcements, links to business stimulus packages. It seems like quite a useful package here.
Yes. And on ipolitics.ca, we have an article with a more comprehensive listing of the various COVID-19 stimulus funding available. If we come down here, we see for federal programs, things like refocusing programs such as the Strategic Innovation Fund, NRC IRAP, and the Innovation Superclusters, support for manufacturers, National Research Council organizing a COVID-19 challenge program to address a range of public health needs, and various procurement related announcements.
I would go so far as to say that most industry associations, most technology organizations are actively tracking government response to the latest crisis. I would suggest that if you're looking for more links, you go to the Kitchener, Ontario-based Communitech. There's an organization called Funding Porthole, which is a state-of-the-art grants and incentive advisory practice with offices in Canada, the US, and the UK, which promises to help companies and other applicants get private sector and public sector funding. And they've been doing a lot of work putting together packages to let people know about government support during the latest crisis. I would also suggest that there's a lot more expected to come down the pipe over the next few weeks. To be fair, what's happening in the United States now is likely to show up in some way, shape, or form in Canada a week later or 2 weeks down the road. For North America, at least, the US government is providing the lead on this, and Canadians are primarily just following along.
It's also important to note that the incentives are not restricted only to the business side of the house, but also for workers, as we see here on iPolitics, temporary wage subsidies, emergency support benefits, emergency care benefits, and work sharing measures, and things like that. So both sides of the house are getting assistance.
I agree. In many ways, providing support to individual workers is just as important as providing support to businesses to remain functioning.
And proving that you can't make some people happy no matter what, comes a piece from rabble.ca titled Liberals Flub COVID-19 Emergency Assistance. And this piece is by Duncan Cameron. The Liberal brand is in ascension. With the world facing a pandemic, Justin Trudeau, who has faced 7 years of Conservatives unleashing personal attacks, beginning with "just not a leader" TV ads, is now looking like a leader. The Prime Minister leads the Canadian response to COVID-19, while his wife battles the virus and he and his family are self-isolated.
I agree that you can't satisfy everybody all the time. I would suggest that this is an unfolding situation. Nobody is quite sure what's going on. The real situation may not be identified for months. I would suggest that we're at the beginning of an evolving story, perhaps the biggest story of the last 100 years. And while it started out as a pandemic story, the complete economic shutdown of much of the world is moving the coronavirus story away from a pandemic story and into the economic realm. Who's to say what's going to change and modify over the next little while?
Indeed, and ironic is going through the rest of the article, we see here that the article even begins to praise some of the measures being taken. If I can continue, maddeningly, the emergency measures announced March 19th by the Liberals in response to the economic distress caused by the virus fall well short of what is needed. Employment insurance replacement income of no more than 55% of earnings is not going to help $12 an hour workers stave off destitution when they lose their jobs, which I find profoundly amusing given that conservatives are typically in favor of small government, minimal government intervention, and are rabidly opposed to handouts of any kind. I find that profoundly amusing.
I'm also a little confused. My understanding of the minimum wage, at least in Ontario, is that it's substantially higher than $12 an hour now, and it's going up to $14.60 as of June the 1st, at least according to a quick web search. I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like at least a statement of fact to go with all the confusion over opinion and the premature. I don't know, the premature damning of any response.
Agreed, and certainly yes, lower wage and minimum wage workers, regardless if they're making $12 or $14 an hour, it may not be enough. It may be enough to keep them afloat, but not enough over the long term. But it's important to remember, especially in large cities like Toronto, where cost of living is exacerbated by many factors, including high rents and the what many are describing as the overheated real estate market. So there are other factors at play here, and we need to see how this plays out.
No, I agree. It's going to be a period of time before we are actually in any sort of position to recommend sensible, rational programs to ameliorate what's currently going on.
And those are the stories we're covering this week. As always, the articles we've referenced are listed in the show notes below.
If you'd like to promote your event or activity, or if you think you have insight into Canada's current innovation economy, our current COVID-19 crisis, please send me an email. Send the email to mr.chuck.black@gmail.com. And that's all for this week. We'll be back next week with more stories covering our current age of ingenuity.